Hi guys, Chris here, and welcome to my channel. Today I'm going to talk to you about the books I read between November 17th and November 23rd. First up, I read Bright Storm by Vashti Hardy, and I gave this book 4.5 stars. This book follows twins Maudie and Arthur. Their father is an explorer who dies on a trip to be the first person to reach South Polaris. When one of the other crews returns, they inform everyone that Arthur and Maudie's father has died, but not just that he tried to sabotage their ship. This is a big no-no and causes the twins to lose all of their inheritance as their father's assets are seized. They basically end up getting sold by the person whose custody their father left them in, and they end up living with this horrible family. The twins, however, are convinced that their father never could have done that. It just wasn't who he was. So they end up joining the crew of the Aurora to go to South Polaris and retrace their father's steps and find out the true story of what happened to their father. I really enjoyed this book. I really enjoyed the dynamic between Arthur and Maudie. I love their relationship and how it is shown how much these two love and care for each other and how much they mean to each other, especially when they're the only family they have left. I love seeing them struggle to come to terms with the fact that their father's dead and he may not have been the person that they thought he was. I love how they fight to go on that journey to find out what happened to their dad. And I really enjoyed getting to see how their father's last mission unraveled and how they got to find out the true story of what happened to their dad. I really liked some of the characters they met that are part of the crew for the Aurora. I liked getting to see how they were respected despite the fact that they were younger. Arthur also does not have one of his arms. His sister created a metal arm for him, so it is interesting to see how Arthur gets around despite not having both of his natural arms and how he has adapted to his disability, though for him, I believe he was born that way. So for him, he's never known anything different, but it is still quite interesting to see, again, how his sister takes care of his arm, and that shows their family dynamic, as it is something she created because she's very, very talented when it comes to mechanical stuff. I really enjoy this book a lot more than I thought I was going to, actually. This was a surprise. Like, I was expecting, based on the description, for this to be like a high 3-star or maybe a 4-star. I was not expecting to love it as much as I did. And I'm definitely planning on reading the sequel to this book. Next up, I read Night Books by J.A. White, and I gave this book 2 stars. This follows a boy named Alex who loves all things scary. He even writes scary stories, but one night he decides that he's going to throw his stories away, but on his trip to the basement, ends up going into a random apartment where he is trapped by a witch. He talks to a girl that has also been trapped by the witch and finds out that there's really no escape, and the only thing that's keeping her from disposing of Alex is the fact that she reads him a scary story every night. One of the scary stories he was trying to throw away. All the while, he's trying to figure out a way to escape, and hoping that he has enough stories to last him until he can figure out a way to escape this terrible predicament. I was not super invested in this book. I didn't find the stories he wrote very scary. I think this may be one of those times where I am the wrong audience for this book. I feel like when I was the target age for this book, I might have found it a lot more scary than I do as an adult, and I think that definitely affected my enjoyment of this book. There were times when I had to kind of force myself to pick it back up and get through it so that I could knock it off of my TBR. The thing that kept this from being a 1-star was seeing how Alex's relationships with the other characters in the book developed. And I did like that aspect of it, and so I gave it 2 stars. I just think that it's not the book for me, and that's not the fault of the book. I just think that in this case, it's one middle grade that does not work for me as an adult. Next up, I read The House with Chicken Legs by Sophie Anderson, and I gave this book 3.75 stars. This book follows Marinka, who is a granddaughter of one of the Yagas. The Yagas are the guardians who guide the dead to the afterlife. They don't really have contact with the living, and they live in a house with chicken legs that moves whenever it feels like it. This really bothers Marinka, as she just wants to make friends and have a life and know that when she goes to bed, she'll be waking up in the same place and that her house won't have moved her away. As the granddaughter of a Yaga, it is her destiny to become a Yaga herself, and she doesn't want that. She really rebels against her grandmother and the life her grandmother has kind of set up for her as a Yaga. However, then one day her grandmother mysteriously disappears, and Marinka is willing to do whatever she has to do to bring her grandmother back. I will say I really love the house. The house actually has its own personality and is like a proper character, which I was not expecting. So it was really interesting getting to see how living in a house that has essentially a mind of its own and its own personality affected Marinka's life, because it's an actual character in the story. I sympathized with Marinka in the fact that she wanted a different life than the one her grandmother had laid out for her. I think it is totally relatable to have people in your life who believe you should be one way or you should do something, and that isn't necessarily the hopes and dreams you have for yourself. I also found it relatable that Marinka was upset and couldn't understand why her grandmother wouldn't let her have a life and friends and stuff. And I thought it was quite interesting as we found out her grandmother's reasoning behind the decisions that she was making. However, in some ways, I feel like at times this book could be a little confusing and a little all over the place. So I wasn't as invested as I probably should have been, hence why it got under 4 stars. However, I did enjoy most of the book, and I enjoyed Sophie's writing style, so I definitely plan to try other books by her. And lastly, I read European Travel for the Monstrous Gentlewoman by Theodora Goss. I gave this book 3.75 stars. This is the second book in the, let me see what it's called. The Extraordinary Adventures of the Athena Club series. The Athena Club series essentially follows the daughters of literary characters. The main one in the first book is Mary Jekyll, who is the daughter of Dr. Jekyll. And there are several other literary characters that we come across in these books. I don't want to say too much more, as it's been so long since I read the first one that I don't want to accidentally spoil something for the first book by mentioning other characters that we follow, because I can't remember which of those characters would be spoilers. I started this book sometime last year, and I ended up finally picking it up this year, and I had to start over at the beginning because otherwise I would have had no idea what was going on. I, again, like the character dynamics and how it's told throughout the book, as essentially this is a book that the characters are writing about their adventures, because there's scenes in the book where the characters directly talk to the audience. So I think that that's an interesting choice of writing style, where if the characters are talking to us, we obviously know that they made it out all right, or they wouldn't be sitting down and writing their stories and chatting with us. It was interesting to see how they work together in this book, and I definitely think there's some very intriguing things that happen in this book that set up the next book in the series and make me want to find out why those little plot threads were dropped in this book and where they're going to lead to in the next book. However, as these are massive, I'm not exactly chomping at the bit to pick up the next book. It might be a little bit. And actually, I read this for Tome Topple, so maybe I will save the third book in this series for the next round of Tome Topple. All in all, I do like this series, and I did enjoy this book. And if you like kind of retellings with a twist of, again, like daughters of literary characters, then, and strong female characters, then you should probably check these books out because they're quite interesting. These are some of the books I've read recently. Have you read any of these books? If so, talk to me about them in the comments below. If you've made it this far in the video, leave me a ship emoji in honor of Brightstorm. Like this video and subscribe to my channel, and I'll talk to you guys next time. Bye!